With the WWE Network, you can watch any pay-per-view at any time of your choosing. And of course, since I just purchased the network last week, the first pay-per-view I thought I would start off with is WrestleMania 17. Now, the fact that I had yet to watch it as a wrestling fan is probably a sin. But that being said, though, I watched it this past weekend, really enjoyed it, and thought I'd make a WrestleRant video with my thoughts on the show so many years later. And I'm thinking about bringing back the WrestleRant series, the video series, not just the radio show, on a regular basis going forward. I want to bring it back and review old pay-per-views that I have yet to watch and giving my thoughts on it in 2014 as opposed to when it actually happened. But that being said, though, if you like this video, just make sure to leave a comment below, like the video, whatever. Just let me know if you'd like to see more of these videos going forward. But nonetheless, kicking off WrestleMania 17 was Jericho versus William Regal for the Intercontinental Championship. Going into this match, Jericho was obviously on the nerves of William Regal. Those two were battling it out. William Regal at the time was the WWF commissioner, so he was in a place of an authority. This match was more so about the personal beef between the two as opposed to being over the Intercontinental Championship. But that being said, though, it was a very nice technical matchup to kick off the show. I thoroughly enjoyed it, especially as a fan of both Jericho and Regal. I thought it was a very nice matchup to kick off the show. As I said, more so about the rivalry between the two, and I was very surprised to see this match be accompanied by a video package, because usually you don't see that nowadays at WrestleMania, an opening match accompanied by a video package, making it feel meaningful in the process. But that being said, though, it was a very nice, well-wrestled matchup. I thought the finish came a bit too early, but aside from that, I thought it was a very good matchup to kick off the show. Up next, we had Taz and the APA, or the Acolytes, so to speak, for in other terms, I should say, taking on the Right to Censor. Now, I had no idea the Right to Censor faction existed before watching the show, to be quite honest with you. And the only real thing I can say about them, I get the gimmick and whatnot, but the theme was so annoying, and it was so good that they were heels because I hated their theme, and having them make that long entrance walk down the ramp was just absolutely obnoxious because their theme was just blaring and blaring and blaring and blaring and would not stop. But that being said, though, it was a fine match for what it was. Really wasn't anything special. It was just kind of a random six-man tag team match. Like I said, I didn't know any of the background going into this. Don't know the aftermath. Don't know the background or anything leading into this. I just kind of watched the match or watched the show for what it was. So I don't know if this match had any history behind it, but as it seemed, it just kind of seemed like they wanted to have a place for these guys at WrestleMania, so they just kind of threw them together. Taz and the APA go over. Pretty decent matchup for what it was, but nothing all that special. Up next, a hardcore triple threat match for the hardcore championship between Kane, the Big Show, and Raven, and probably was my favorite match up to this point in the show. I love the idea of a 24/7 hardcore title rule. I obviously started watching wrestling in 2008, so I started watching far later on than when this thing was in existence, when it was in its existence, so I was unable to see the hardcore title in its prime. But that being said, though, I thought it's an awesome concept. I thought it was a very cool concept to have. Unfortunately, we will probably have nothing like that ever again on WWE. But that being said, though, I really enjoyed this matchup for what it was. It was essentially a Falls Count Anywhere matchup, but the fact they were throwing each other through windows and through doors and using weapons all over the place and just going all over the arena, I thought was pretty cool. Raven was just kind of the odd man out, acting as the cowardly heel, running away from both Kane and Big Show. I thought he was going to retain his title. And just before I go any further with this, I didn't know any of the results of the matches except for the main event matches on this show. So most of this just kind of came as a surprise most of the matches came as a surprise to me. So I was just kind of watching as it was going along. So it wasn't extremely predictable. I couldn't foresee the finishes. But I was surprised to see Kane go over with that beautiful big, the leg drop off the top of the stage after knocking both Big Show and Raven off the stage and onto the side stage that was right next to it. So I thought that was really cool, too. A really cool finish. Kane, the new hardcore champion. I thought this was the WrestleMania that the hardcore title changed like 20,000 times, but I guess that was the year prior to that, or a couple of years prior to that. But even still, though, a very fun match for what it was. I love the idea of the hardcore title, the 24/7 rule. It's a shame we don't have anything like that today. Up next, we had Eddie Guerrero versus Test for the European Championship. Not much history between these two going into the matchup, or at least from what I saw. They showed a brief video package of the prior week's episode of Monday Night Raw with Eddie Guerrero getting the best of Test. The match itself was okay. I didn't really enjoy it all that much. Big fan of both Test and Eddie Guerrero, but their styles, Test is impressive for a big guy, and his style just didn't clash all that well with Eddie's, who's more of a high flyer, but they made the most of it and whatnot. They just didn't have too good of a chemistry inside the ring. That's why the matchup wasn't all that great in my opinion. but they made the most of it. They made it work. Test was extremely impressive in some of the maneuvers that he could pull off. And after some interference from Perry Saturn at ringside, as well as the interfering Dean Malenko, Eddie Guerrero was crowned the new European champion. So that was pretty cool. Cool moment, him and his stable. The whole lie, cheat, and steal gimmick of Eddie Guerrero is going into full effect here as the new European champion. Thought that was pretty cool. So at this point in the show, I was thinking maybe this show isn't everything it's cracked up to be. I mean, I've heard rave reviews about the show, about it being the best pay-per-view of WWE's of all time. And up to this point in the show, I was kind of doubting myself because these first 4 matches weren't anything great. I enjoyed the opener, but the last 3 matches, the hardcore title was fun, but the 6-man tag team match and the European title match weren't anything spectacular. But that all changed this next matchup. Chris Benoit versus Kurt Angle in a great wrestling matchup. In the first few minutes of this matchup, they were just kind of putting wrestling holds on one another. The crowd in attendance clapped out of respect for both guys. Just a change in momentum for both individuals. It wasn't a clearly one-handed dominating performance for either guy. It was very equal between both guys throughout the matchup. Just a great wrestling matchup. Just awesome chemistry between these two guys. Back and forth, the momentum went for most of the matchup. And the story going into this was Chris Benoit was trying to make Kurt Angle tap out, because he did so a couple days earlier on SmackDown or Raw or whatever it was, but there was no referee in sight, and that's exactly what happened on this show. Chris Benoit forced Kurt Angle to tap out, and the commentators were kind of playing it up that neither guy at this point in their WWF careers had yet to tap out. So it made that much bigger of a deal. So the fact that Chris Benoit made Kurt Angle tap, the referee wasn't there to see it, Kurt Angle picks up the win anyway via dirty tactics, I thought was pretty cool. It was a good way to keep the feud going. Like I said, didn't know any of the aftermath after the show, so I'm not really sure if the feud continued past this point and if it culminated at Backlash. But even still, though, a very good matchup. And I like the story behind it, too. It wasn't just a random wrestling match that only these smarks in IWC can enjoy. And I know this is an 01, so there's really not much of an IWC at the time. But even still, it had a story behind it, so it was something to get invested in, something to care about. So up next in the show, we had Chyna versus Ivory. Chyna had come back from a neck injury after being taken out by the right to Censor, which Ivory was a part of. Pretty much dominated Ivory and captured her first women's title in the process. Match was basically Ivory running away from Chyna the entire time. I thought she was going to pick up the win. Apparently not, though, but Chyna was mega over with the live crowd. So it's a shame that she's not on good terms with WWE at the time. I would like to see her in WWE at least one more time. I think that'd be pretty cool. But even still, though, new women's champion. The match itself was just, basically was what it was. So up next, we had Shane McMahon versus Vince McMahon in a street fight. Father versus son match. A much better match than I thought it was going to be. Mick Foley with the special guest referee. You had interference from Trish Stratus, from Linda McMahon of all people. We had interference from Foley himself. Just all these random people interfering in this matchup. I loved it. I loved every single minute of it. Trish Stratus coming down to ringside, slapping Stephanie. Those two brawling at it after she slapped Vince McMahon because she was supposed to be apparently aligned with Vince. So those two go running off, and then Linda at the time was in a sedated state, so she couldn't speak or move or whatever. Vince McMahon puts her in the middle of the ring, or in the corner of the ring, sitting on a chair, and as he goes to beat the living crap out of his son Shane, who only a few days earlier acquired WCW, and you see the WCW guy sitting up in a certain section of the arena, so I thought that was pretty cool as well. So he's going to beat down Shane, and then out of nowhere, Linda comes up with the low blow and a huge pop from the crowd. I thought that was a great moment, and this is coming from a guy, Shane is very athletic. Vince McMahon, not so much. He's impressive in the ring, but I mean, this guy's 50 years old by this point in his career, or point in his life, and I just did not expect this match to be anything great, and it superseded my expectations by far. It was a very enjoyable matchup. Was it a 5-star classic? Absolutely not. It was a nice change of pace, though, after, Angle Benoit. That was a great wrestling match. This was just pure entertainment and just family affair, so to speak, between all 4 of these family members of Shane, Vince, Stephanie, and Linda. Linda gets her vengeance by hitting the low blow on Vince. Foley attacks Vince as well with a beautiful knee in the corner. Shades of Daniel Bryan, possibly. And obviously, Mick Foley came before Daniel Bryan, but you know what I mean. And then Shane with the coast-to-coast to finish it off, picks up the win. Very cool match, much better than I thought it was going to be. Up next, of course, who can forget TLC2 with the Dudleys, Edge and Christian, and the Hardy Boys in a triple threat TLC match of the World Tag Team titles. Insane match. I don't think I've ever seen this match in its entirety before watching this show, to be quite honest with you. So I thought that was really cool. Really, really enjoyed this matchup. Interference from Lita on behalf of the Hardys. Interference from Spike Dudley on behalf of the Dudleys, of course. And interference from Rhino on behalf of Edge and Christian. A great matchup. There was an absolute train wreck, and I mean that in the best sense of the word, not the bad sense. Just everywhere. There were crazy spots going on with the ladders, tables, and chairs. Obviously, the most famous visual of all time, of one of the most iconic moments in Edge's career, is when he speared Jeff Hardy as he was hanging off the championship belt. Awesome to rewatch that, and the crowd reaction and the commentators' reaction to that, because JR and who was on commentary? JR and Paul Heyman. Paul Heyman, by the way, was very cool on commentary. I didn't get to hear him on commentary all that much over the course of my tenure as a wrestling fan, so that was awesome. So just a crazy match with Edge and Christian emerging victorious as the World Tag Team Champions. Final 3 matches. Gimmick Battle Royale was total throwaway. I was surprised that it even made it onto the show. I thought it'd be pretty cool for like a nostalgia act, but the entrances dragged on and on and on, and it was longer than the actual match. Even the commentators acknowledged how quickly people are being eliminated. And then the Iron Sheik emerged victorious. Sergeant Slaughter got him in a Cobra Clutch afterwards. Anyway, so that was pretty pointless. And this match would have been ripped to shreds in today's world with the IWC and whatnot. But even still, it was a complete waste of time. But it, everything else pretty much overshadowed this. So it was just a small blemish on what was otherwise a great show. But up next, we had Taker versus Triple H. Another awesome matchup. I thought their matches from WrestleMania 27 and 28 were great. Go back and watch this if you haven't already. A great match from these two, just such great chemistry. And Triple H, I thought at the time was kind of an up and coming superstar, but he really wasn't. He was already in the business for a number of years, had already headlined WrestleMania, and already been a multi-time world champion. So he had already made his mark in the WWE, but this had been his biggest challenge to date in taking on The Undertaker and the streak, which they acknowledged. At what point did they start acknowledging the streak and its importance to WrestleMania? I don't know, but at this point, it had already been a thing. Triple H was already trying to put an end to the streak, couldn't do it. With the last ride, Undertaker emerged victorious. Great matchup, and one of the better Undertaker WrestleMania matches I've seen. In much better, I think, than their last 2 matches at WrestleMania 28 and 27. That's probably debatable, but bottom line is great match. And of course comes the main event between Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock. I know beforehand it had been regarded by many wrestling fans as one of the best WrestleMania main events of all time, and it definitely did not disappoint in my opinion. Just a great matchup, and these two are another prime example of two wrestlers that just have amazing chemistry together, put on a hell of a fight. They added the no disqualification stipulation just mere moments before this match started. It worked to their benefit. They used the extreme environment to their full advantage, going all over the ringside area, going through the tables and stunners and rock bottoms, stealing one another's finishers. Just great stuff. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Vince McMahon comes down to ringside, tries to help Stone Cold win. And the premise of this matchup was that Stone Cold was desperate to win that championship. And JR, I was watching WrestleMania 19 earlier, so that's probably why I said Taz. But JR on commentary really sold it as that this was Stone Cold's last chance at the WWF title after winning the Royal Rumble, and he desperately wanted back his WWF title and would go to any lengths to get it, and he certainly did on the show with aligning with his former enemy, Mr. McMahon of all things. And at this point in the wrestling world, this is probably one of the most shocking things that could possibly happen. So JR, of course, was selling this like crazy, like he made his deal with the devil and all this great stuff. Like he was selling it like amazingly, basically, is what I can say in just so few short words. But they sold it great. They let it soak in with the crowd. Stone Cold Steve Austin, this was held in Texas, so he was, of course, cheered anyway. But this was basically his heel turn, which he, to this day, regrets because he was so over as a babyface. But such a great ending to an amazing show. Really enjoyed watching this WrestleMania back for the first time, especially since 17 is my favorite number. But that being said, though, if there's any more pay-per-views you want me to watch and review on this channel under the WrestleRant video series, let me know, and I'll be sure to watch them. Thanks for watching, guys, and make sure to subscribe as well. This is GSM, signing out. Till next time, guys.